Exile into the Deathworld. The transport ship cut through the black of space, its engines burning against the silence. Inside the dark chamber of the ship, a young human girl named Elara sat chained to the cold floor. Her eyes stared forward with no fear, though her heart pounded like a drum. She had been accused of defying the will of the alien overlord, a crime punishable by exile. The Council did not choose death for her. They chose something worse, the Deathworld. This was not just any planet, it was the most dangerous world known in the galaxy, a place where even armored soldiers avoided stepping. The soil itself carried poison, the trees dripped venom, and the skies screamed with predators that never slept. For most species, landing on the Deathworld meant only one thing: death within the first night. The guards sneered as they dragged Elara to the shuttle bay. "Let us see how long the human lasts," one hissed. His reptilian scales shimmered under the dim light. Another alien spat on the floor. "The beasts will tear her apart before the sun rises." But Elara did not speak. She kept her silence, gripping her hands into fists. She would not give them her fear. The ship descended, shaking as it entered the storm-filled skies of the Deathworld. Thunder roared like the growl of a beast. The air was thick, almost alive. Carrying the scent of blood and fire, the shuttle door opened, and a wave of heat and stench rushed in. The guards unchained Elara and shoved her outside. She stumbled onto the rough ground, her feet sinking into black soil that seemed to breathe. The sky above was a swirl of red clouds and jagged lightning. The forest before her groaned as if it were a living beast. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes, their branches lined with thorns that dripped glowing liquid. The sound of movement echoed through the undergrowth, heavy, sharp, and deliberate. She was not alone. The shuttle lifted away, leaving her with nothing but the rags on her body. No food, no weapon, no water, just the Deathworld. The roar of the engines faded, replaced by the low growl of something watching her from the shadows. Elara's chest tightened, but she forced herself to breathe slow. She would not panic. She had been cast into hell, but she was human, and humans were not so easy to break. Her first step into the forest sent creatures scattering. Long-legged insects the size of her arm hissed and retreated into holes. Birds with bone-like wings screamed from the treetops. The ground trembled as something heavy moved deeper inside. She had to find safety before night fell, or the planet would devour her alive. Elara searched the ground and found 2 broken stones. Her fingers bled as she struck them together. Sparks flew and she smiled faintly through the pain. Fire. She could make fire with shaking hands. She gathered dry leaves and brittle twigs. After endless tries, the spark caught, and a small flame was born. In that fire she saw hope, but the light also drew eyes. From the dark, a pair of glowing shapes appeared. Eyes, they belonged to a predator, tall as a tree, its body cloaked in scales that shimmered like metal. It stepped forward, claws sinking into the soil. Its growl rolled through the air, low and hungry. Elara froze, every instinct telling her to run, but running meant death. She tightened her grip on a branch she had sharpened into a crude spear. The beast lunged, its jaw opening wide with rows of teeth. Elara swung with all her strength. The branch struck its eye. The predator roared in rage and pain, crashing into the ground and thrashing wildly. Elara did not stop. She screamed, striking again and again until the creature pulled back, snarling. Blood poured from its wound and it finally retreated into the shadows. Her body shook, her arms weak, but she stood tall. The fire flickered behind her, and for a moment, she looked less like prey and more like a challenger. The forest grew quiet, and she felt the weight of unseen eyes watching her. The predators had not left. They were studying her, measuring her, as if deciding if she was prey or something else. Elara knew this was only the beginning. The Deathworld was alive, and it had accepted her challenge. She clenched her fists, firelight dancing on her face. She whispered to herself, "I will not die here." Above, hidden ships watched her through invisible eyes. Alien voices whispered across the stars. "The human girl lives," one said. "Impossible," said another. Yet the Deathworld itself seemed to bend around her presence. For the first time in centuries, the apex predators did not feast. They waited, as if curious, night was coming. And with it, new horrors. Ilara had survived the first breath of the Deathworld. But survival was not enough. She felt it in her bones. This planet would test her again and again, until either she broke or she became something more, and so her exile began. First blood. The night settled over the Deathworld like a shroud. The red sky dimmed into black, and strange stars blinked through cracks in the storm clouds. Ilara sat close to her fire, the flickering flame, the only barrier between her and the endless unknown that lurked beyond the shadows. Her body ached from the fight with the predator. Her arms burned from the desperate struggle, and her throat felt dry as sand. Yet her eyes remained sharp, refusing to close. For she knew the moment she slept, the planet would claim her. The sounds of the forest grew louder in the darkness. Insects screeched from the undergrowth, and wings beat heavily above as the fire cracked. Ilara's thoughts drifted back to the council who had sent her here. They had believed she would die quickly, just another forgotten punishment. But they had not understood the human spirit. They had not seen the stubborn fire in her veins. For Ilara, every second she breathed was a defiance, a message carried into the night that she would not break. Then it came, not from the forest, but from the earth itself. A rumbling growl shook the soil. Vibrating through her bones, Ilara rose slowly. Clutching her sharpened branch, her firelight revealed movement. First one shadow, then two, then three. Shapes emerged from the darkness, taller than her, broader, their eyes glowing like molten gold. These were not scavengers or mindless beasts. These were hunters, apex predators born to rule the Deathworld. Their movements were slow, deliberate, filled with power. They did not rush, they circled, studying her as if measuring the worth of her life. Ilara's heartbeat thundered, but she held her ground. The fire was her shield, yet she knew it would not protect her forever. One predator stepped forward, its massive claws dragging across the ground. Its breath came in hot waves that stank of blood and rot. Its jaw opened to reveal teeth longer than her fingers. Ilara gripped the branch tighter, whispering to herself, "I will not be prey." Then the beast lunged and the world exploded into chaos. The impact drove her backward, pain tearing through her chest. Her branch struck wildly, cutting across its scaled hide, but the weapon snapped in half with the force. The predator roared in fury, its voice splitting the night. Ilara rolled away just as its jaws slammed into the ground where she had stood. Dust and broken earth flew into the air. She scrambled toward the fire, seizing a burning stick. Flames licking her skin as she lifted it high. The predator charged again, but this time the fire met its face. It shrieked, thrashing back in shock, the flames searing its nostrils and eyes. Ilara did not stop. She pressed forward, screaming as she slammed the torch into its head again and again. Her hands blistered, her arms trembling, yet the fire gave her strength. The beast staggered, its roar echoing into the forest. The other predators watched in silence. Not moving, their eyes glowed brighter, reflecting the flames. Ilara realized with horror that this was no random attack. This was a trial, a test, and they were waiting to see if she would survive or be consumed. Her body shook, exhaustion pulling at her limbs, but she refused to fall. The predator, blinded and enraged, stumbled back into the shadows, leaving a trail of blood steaming against the soil. Ilara dropped the broken torch and collapsed onto her knees. Breathing hard, the firelight flickered across her face, sweat and ash staining her skin. She had survived again. She had not only fought off the predator but had drawn blood. The Deathworld had seen her first kill, and the night itself seemed to acknowledge it. The forest grew unnaturally quiet. The smaller creatures that had once screeched and howled now stayed silent. The apex predators circled once more, their heavy footsteps echoing around her. But none attacked. Their eyes studied her, glowing with something other than hunger. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps recognition. Ilara felt the weight of their gaze pressing against her chest. It was as if the Deathworld itself had turned its attention on her. whispering a challenge into her ear. She lifted her head, her voice raw but steady. "I am not afraid of you." Her words carried into the night. Swallowed by the silence, the predators did not move closer, nor did they retreat. They only watched, their glowing eyes burning like stars in the dark. Then, slowly, one by one, they melted back into the forest, leaving Alara alone with her fire and her thoughts. The test was not over, but she had passed the first blood. Alara lay back against the rough soil, her chest rising and falling with each painful breath. Her body was broken and bruised, but her spirit had grown sharper, stronger. The Deathworld had tried to take her life, and instead, it had marked her as something different, something more. She closed her eyes for a moment, not to sleep but to gather her strength, for she knew the predators would return, and next time, they might not test her, they might claim her. Above, in the vastness of space, the alien overlords received word of her survival. Through hidden probes they had watched, expecting screams, expecting death. Instead, they had seen a human girl draw blood from the planet's fiercest hunter. The council chambers filled with whispers of disbelief. One alien voice broke through the murmurs. "Perhaps we have made a mistake," but another hissed. "Or perhaps we have created something worse." Back on the Deathworld, Alara opened her eyes as the wind carried the smell of rain and blood. The ground trembled again, far heavier this time. Something greater was coming, and the night was far from over. She gripped the half-broken branch in her hand, her fire burning low beside her, her lips curled into the faintest smile. She was no longer a victim of exile. She was a challenger, and her story was just beginning. The Predator's Test. The dawn on the Deathworld did not bring safety. Instead, it revealed horrors that the night had hidden. The red clouds parted for a moment, allowing a dim light to touch the twisted forest, and Alara could see clearly the marks of the predator's retreat. Thick streaks of black blood painted the ground, steaming as if alive. Her body ached. Her hands blistered, her lips cracked with thirst, but her spirit remained unbroken. She had survived, and survival was proof that she belonged. Alara stood at the edge of her dying fire, her eyes scanning the forest with sharp focus. She knew the beasts would not leave her in peace. They had tested her once, and they would return. The question was not if, but when. She gathered broken branches and torn bark, determined to build a stronger fire before night fell again. Yet, as she worked, she could not shake the feeling that she was being watched. The air itself carried a heavy silence, a silence that was not natural. It came in the form of shadows moving just beyond her sight, shapes slipping between the twisted trees, glowing eyes appearing for a moment before vanishing. Her heart beat faster, but she forced herself to stay calm. She knew they wanted fear. They wanted to see her break. The predators of the Deathworld were not mindless killers. They were rulers of this world, and every ruler demanded proof before granting respect. By midday, the silence broke. A deep, thunderous roar rolled through the forest, shaking leaves from the trees. Birds screamed and scattered into the sky, and insects crawled into their holes. Alara froze. Her sharpened stick gripped tight. The roar came again, closer now, followed by the heavy crash of footsteps. Something enormous was coming. Not just one, but many. Then they emerged. A pack of apex predators stepped into the clearing. Massive creatures covered in black scales that shimmered like obsidian. Their bodies were sleek but powerful. Built for speed and strength, their eyes glowed with molten fire, burning with an intelligence that made Alara's chest tighten. These were not mindless beasts. These were hunters who had ruled this planet for centuries. And they had come for her. The leader of the pack, larger than the rest, stepped forward. Its muscles rippled with every movement, and its claws dug deep into the soil as it growled low. The other predators fanned out around Alara, circling her slowly. Their tails swished across the ground like whips, their breaths coming in slow, deliberate hisses. Alara felt the weight of their presence pressing down on her. She was surrounded, and escape was impossible. Her mind screamed to run, but she knew running would mean death. The predators were not here to chase. They were here to test. She raised her broken branch high, her arms trembling not from fear but from exhaustion. "I will not kneel," she whispered. The words were for herself, a reminder of who she was. A human, a survivor. The leader roared, the sound deafening, and then it lunged. Elara barely had time to react as its massive body crashed toward her. She rolled to the side, the ground ripping beneath its weight. Her branch struck its flank, but the wood snapped uselessly against its scales. She scrambled to her feet, grabbing a burning stick from her fire, and thrust it into the beast's face. The flames licked across its jaw, and the predator pulled back with a snarl. The pack growled in unison, their eyes glowing brighter. They were not disappointed, they were intrigued. Elara's chest heaved as she circled with the torch, her body drenched in sweat. The predators advanced again, but slower now, as if measuring her response. They snapped their jaws near her, claws slashing the air. Each strike came close enough to kill, but they always stopped short, leaving only shallow cuts and torn cloth. They were not trying to end her life. They were testing her strength, her courage, her spirit. The trial lasted for hours. Every time she fought back, every time she refused to run, the predators grew more deliberate. They circled tighter, their growls louder, but never struck to kill. Elara realized the truth. This was not just a hunt. It was a ritual. The Deathworld demanded dominance, and if she could not prove herself, she would be crushed. At last, as the sun began to sink behind the poisoned horizon, the leader roared once more and stopped. Its massive head lowered, its burning eyes locked on Elara. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. She stood trembling, her torch raised, blood dripping from small wounds across her arms and legs. She expected the final strike, the moment where the beast ended her. Instead, the predator stepped back, its roar echoing into the forest. The rest of the pack followed, their glowing eyes fading into the trees, leaving her standing alone in the clearing. Elara collapsed onto her knees, her torch falling into the soil. Her breath came in sharp gasps, her muscles weak and burning. Yet she knew what had just happened. The predators had spared her. They had tested her spirit, and though she had no claws, no scales, no fangs, she had survived. She had proven herself not as prey, but as something different, something the Deathworld had not seen before. Above, hidden alien probes recorded everything, transmitting it to distant worlds, in the council chambers of the galaxy's rulers. Voices clashed in anger and fear. "The human should be dead," one snarled. "No one survives the trial of the apex predators." Another voice, colder, whispered, "Perhaps we do not understand what humans truly are." The words hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Back in the forest, Elara lay against the soil. Staring at the darkening sky, her body screamed in pain, but her heart burned with fire. She knew this was only the beginning. The Deathworld had tested her, and she had not broken. She was still alive, and in her survival, she had earned the attention of both beasts and empires alike. The struggle for survival. The night after the predator's test was unlike any other Elara had faced. The fire she had built flickered low, and though her body begged for rest, her mind stayed sharp and awake. Her muscles throbbed from countless near misses, her skin burned from scratches, and her throat felt raw from shouting against the beasts. Yet her spirit refused to break. She lay awake under the canopy of twisted trees, staring at the storm-filled sky, wondering how long she could keep surviving in this world where every living thing wanted her gone. When the first light of dawn crept through the broken clouds, Elara forced herself to rise. Her body was weak, her movements stiff, but she knew the Deathworld would not wait for her to recover. The predators had tested her and left her alive, but she understood the message. They would return, and next time she would need more than a burning stick and sheer defiance to stand against them. If she wanted to survive, she had to adapt. She had to learn how to live in this nightmare instead of simply surviving it. She began by searching the forest. Moving cautiously through the thorn-choked undergrowth, every step carried danger. Poisonous plants glistened with liquid that could burn skin, and tiny insects waited in nests, ready to swarm and devour anything that touched them. Yet Alara pushed forward, studying the environment, marking which fruits were safe and which leaves burned at a touch. She discovered small streams of water that tasted metallic but cooled her parched throat. She learned which vines could be cut and woven into rope, and which roots could be chewed for strength. Slowly, piece by piece, she built knowledge from the dangers around her. That day, Alara found a cave hidden behind jagged rocks at the base of a hill. Its mouth was narrow, but inside stretched a hollow large enough for shelter. The ground was cool and dry, and the walls bore strange marks, as if claws had scraped across them long ago. She hesitated, knowing it had once belonged to something else, but she also knew she could not spend another night in the open. Gathering wood and stone, she built a stronger fire at the entrance, and used sharp rocks to create crude weapons. The cave became her refuge, not yet a home, but a place where she could plan. The predators did not leave her alone at night. Their glowing eyes appeared beyond the fire, watching her with silent patience. She could feel their presence, their heavy breaths echoing across the clearing. They no longer attacked without warning. Instead, they circled, growling low, as if reminding her that she still lived at their mercy. Yet Alara sensed a change. They were not treating her as prey. They were treating her as something in between, a creature that had not yet proven its place. Her days turned into cycles of pain and discovery. She hunted small creatures with traps built from stone and rope, learning to gut and roast them over her fire. She fashioned spears from broken branches, sharpening them until they gleamed. She learned to climb trees and sleep among the branches when the ground grew too dangerous. Each scar on her arms became a lesson. Each cut a reminder that survival was earned, never given. One afternoon, as she tracked a small reptile through the forest, the ground began to tremble. Dust rose into the air as a beast unlike the others stormed into view. It was massive, a towering creature with armored scales and a tail that could shatter trees. Its roar split the air like thunder, shaking Alara to her core. She knew instantly that she could not fight it. At least not directly. Instead of facing it head-on, she ran, weaving through trees, leading it toward a cliff she had discovered days before. The beast followed with blind fury, its body crashing through the forest like a storm. At the last moment, Alara leapt aside, her body scraping against rocks as the predator lunged forward. Its momentum carried it over the edge, and its roar faded into the abyss below. Alara collapsed against the earth, her chest heaving, her skin torn and bloody. But she smiled faintly. For the first time, she had not only survived but had used her mind to defeat the Deathworld. The planet had forced her to adapt, and she was beginning to understand that survival was not about strength alone. It was about cunning. It was about daring to fight in ways the beasts did not expect. That night, as she returned to her cave, she found the pack of predators waiting once again. Their glowing eyes surrounded her fire, and their massive leader stepped forward. Lowering its head slightly, Alara felt a chill run down her spine. She raised her spear, ready for another trial. But the predator did not attack. Instead, it growled softly, a sound less like hunger and more like recognition. Then, slowly, it turned and vanished into the trees. The rest of the pack following in silence, Alara sank to the ground. Staring into the fire, her heart beat wildly, and she whispered to herself, "They are waiting for me to change." She knew now that every day on this planet was not just survival. It was a challenge. The predators were not simply trying to kill her, they were shaping her, watching to see if she would rise above her human fragility and become something greater. In the distance, storms raged across the horizon, lightning carving the sky, and the forest howled with endless life. Yet within her cave, Alara felt something stirring in her chest, a fire brighter than the flames she had made. She was no longer only surviving, she was learning, and soon she would do more than survive. She would fight, she would endure, and perhaps one day she would rule. The rise of respect days turned into weeks, and the Deathworld became both a torment and a teacher. Alara's body bore the marks of countless battles, her arms covered in scars, her hands hardened from labor, her eyes sharper than ever before. She had learned to hunt with precision, to craft tools from bone and stone, to read the signs of danger in the wind and the shifting shadows of the forest. Each lesson was carved into her through pain, but each lesson made her stronger. She was no longer a girl abandoned to die. She was becoming a creature of the Deathworld itself. The predators knew it too. At first, they had come as hunters, circling her fire, testing her resolve, waiting for her to break. But she had not broken. With each trial, she had stood taller. And now, when they approached, their movements were slower, more deliberate, less hostile. They still roared, they still circled, but their eyes no longer glowed with hunger alone. They glowed with recognition, as if they had begun to see her as one of their own. One evening, as the sky burned red with storms and the forest groaned under heavy winds, Alara crouched near her fire sharpening a spear. The predators appeared again, but this time their leader came closer than ever before. Its massive form blocked out the firelight. Its eyes locked on hers. Alara's grip on the spear tightened, her body tense. She expected another test, another charge, another desperate fight for her life. Instead, the beast lowered its head slightly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. The ground shook as its heavy breath washed over her, hot and foul, but it did not strike. It turned its head toward the forest, releasing a low growl that rolled through the night. Then it walked away, and to Alara's shock, the rest of the pack followed not toward her, but alongside her, as if inviting her to move with them. Alara hesitated, fear battling curiosity, yet something inside her urged her to follow. She rose, spear in hand, and stepped into the shadows of the forest beside them. The predators moved with fluid grace, their massive bodies weaving through the undergrowth. They did not slow for her, and she had to push herself to keep pace. Her breath burned in her chest, her legs ached. But she did not fall behind. At last, they reached a clearing where the ground was torn and soaked with blood. A carcass of a colossal beast lay broken, its armored body ripped apart by claws and fangs. The predators began to feed, their roars echoing across the clearing, and Alara realized why they had brought her. One predator dragged a piece of flesh and dropped it near her feet. Its eyes glowed as it stepped back. Watching, testing her again, Alara stared at the meat, her stomach twisting in hunger and revulsion. She had survived on small prey and roots, never tasting the kill of an apex predator. She knew this was more than food. It was an invitation, a ritual, a chance to prove herself in their world. Slowly, she knelt, tearing a piece of flesh and bringing it to her lips. The taste was bitter, filled with blood and ash, but she did not gag. She swallowed, her eyes never leaving the predator's gaze, and in that moment the pack released a thunderous roar, a sound of approval. From that night everything changed. The predators no longer circled her fire as hunters. They stood at the edge like guardians, watching the forest for threats that even she could not see. When she hunted, they followed at a distance, and when she fought, they observed in silence, measuring every move she made. Each scar she earned was no longer just a wound. It was a mark of belonging. The Deathworld had demanded her blood, and she had given it, and in return it had begun to grant her respect. But respect on this world came with a price one day. As she returned to her cave with a bundle of roots, she found the predators waiting for her again. Their leader stepped forward, its body scarred from countless battles, its eyes burning brighter than fire. It growled deep and long, a sound that shook the trees. The pack spread out around her, their movements sharp, their stares fixed. Alara's heart thundered in her chest as she realized what was happening. This was not another hunt, not another ritual of food or fire. This was a challenge, the leader roared again, lowering its body as it circled her. Its claws dug into the soil, its teeth bared. It was demanding more than survival now. It was demanding dominance. The predators had tested her courage, her will, her endurance, but now they would test her right to stand among them. To be respected was one thing, but to lead was another, and the Deathworld would never allow her to walk halfway. Alara's hands shook, but she raised her spear, her eyes blazing with determination. She knew she could not kill the leader, nor did she want to. This was not a battle of slaughter, but a battle of spirit. She steadied her breath, whispering to herself, "I will not kneel." Then, with a scream that cut through the storm above, she charged forward, her spear aimed at the impossible, ready to fight the greatest trial of her life, the trial of queenship. The air grew heavy with silence as the predators surrounded the clearing, their glowing eyes fixed on the human girl and their mighty leader. The earth trembled under the beast's weight as it lowered its head and growled, the sound rolling like thunder through the twisted forest. Ilara's grip on her spear tightened, her heart racing as she stared into those blazing eyes. She had faced hunger, she had faced fear, she had faced the endless cruelty of this world. But this was different. This was not survival, this was judgment. The leader was not testing if she could live, it was testing if she could lead. Ilara's mind screamed that she could not win. The beast was 3 times her size, its body layered with thick scales, its claws sharp enough to tear through stone. Yet she knew that strength alone would not decide this battle. The predators respected will, they respected defiance, they respected cunning. If she bowed, if she faltered, then she would forever remain beneath them. She steadied her breath and whispered to herself, "I am human, and I will not break." Then, with fire in her eyes, she raised her spear and stepped forward. The predator roared and charged, its massive body tearing across the clearing with terrifying speed. Ilara barely had time to throw herself aside, the ground splitting where its claws struck. The shockwave hurled her against the rocks, pain flashing through her ribs. She gasped for air but forced herself to rise. Clutching her spear tighter, the predator wheeled around, its teeth gleaming in the dim light. Its tail whipping across the ground with force enough to shatter trees, Ilara ducked under the strike, rolling across the soil, and thrust her spear upward. The point scraped across the beast's chest. Drawing a shallow line of blood, the predator roared in fury, the sound shaking her very bones. The pack around them growled and hissed, their eyes burning brighter as they watched the trial unfold. They would not interfere. This was between Ilara and their leader, and the outcome would decide her fate. Ilara's body screamed with exhaustion, but her spirit refused to bow. She darted between the beast's strikes, her small frame giving her speed the monster could not match. She hurled stones at its face, struck at its eyes with her broken spear, and set fire to branches she had planted earlier in the soil. Every move was desperate, but every move carried the same message: "I will not kneel." The leader lunged again, its jaws snapping shut inches from her head. The blast of air knocked her back, and her weapon shattered completely, leaving her unarmed. Blood trickled down her arm, her lungs burned, and her knees nearly gave way. For a moment the predator loomed over her, its shadow swallowing her whole. It roared so loud the forest itself seemed to shiver. The pack echoed the sound, their voices filling the night. It seemed over. But then something inside Ilara ignited. She screamed back, a raw, broken cry that came not from fear but from rage and defiance. Her voice cut through the beast's roars, and for the first time the leader hesitated. Ilara seized the moment. She grabbed a burning branch from her scattered fire and charged, slamming it into the predator's face. Flames licked across its scales, smoke rising as the beast thrashed. Its claws raked across her side, tearing flesh, but she did not fall. She climbed onto its arm. Scrambling higher as the predator shook and roared, she reached its head and slammed the fire into its eye. The beast screamed, its body crashing against the ground. Sending tremors through the clearing, Ilara fell hard, her body aching. Her vision blurred, yet she dragged herself up, bloodied and broken, and stood before the fallen predator. The leader struggled, its massive body heaving, but it did not rise to strike again. Instead, it lowered its head into the soil, its eye smoldering, its breath heavy and hot. The pack grew silent, their glowing eyes fixed on the human girl who had done what none before her could. Ilara stood trembling, clutching her bleeding side, yet her back was straight, her chin lifted. She had not killed the leader, she had not needed to. She had proven her strength not by slaughter but by defiance. She had stood unbroken against the mightiest predator of the Deathworld, and in that act she had claimed her place. Slowly, one by one, the predators lowered their heads. Their massive bodies pressed into the ground in a gesture older than memory, a gesture of respect. The air vibrated with the sound of their low growls. Not of hunger, not of threat, but of acknowledgement. Alara's chest rose and fell as she stared at them, her eyes burning with both exhaustion and triumph. She had come to this planet as prey, but now she stood as something else entirely, something the predators themselves accepted. Far above, in the chambers of the alien council, the scene played across shimmering screens. The overlords watched in silence as the human girl, bloodied and scarred, stood before the bowing predators. Voices rose in fear and disbelief. "This is impossible," one hissed. "No creature has ever earned the respect of the Deathworld," another growled. "If one human girl can do this, what will all humans become?" The room shook with their arguments, but one truth echoed in every corner of the galaxy. Something had changed, and it could never be undone. As the storm raged over the Deathworld, Alara sank to her knees, her strength finally breaking. Yet, even in her collapse, the predators remained by her side. Guarding her like kin, she had survived every test, every horror, every challenge, and now she had risen above them. No longer was she a girl cast into exile. She was the chosen of the Deathworld, and her trial of queenship had begun. The human queen of beasts. The storm raged through the night, thunder shaking the ground while lightning carved white scars across the blood-red sky. Inside the clearing, Alara lay half-conscious, her body battered and torn, yet still alive. Around her, the predators formed a silent circle, their glowing eyes fixed on the fragile human who had stood against their leader and survived. They did not move to attack, nor did they vanish into the forest. Instead, they remained, their heavy breaths rising and falling in unison, guarding her as if she had become something sacred. When dawn came, its light broke weakly through the swirling clouds. The leader of the predators stirred, its body still trembling from the fire and wounds Alara had inflicted. It rose slowly, towering above her, but instead of striking, it lowered its head to the ground, pressing its massive skull into the soil at her feet. The gesture was ancient, one of acknowledgement and acceptance. In that single moment, the pack roared as one, their voices echoing across the Deathworld, shaking the mountains and silencing the skies. The Deathworld had chosen its queen, and she was not a beast, but a human. Alara forced her body to rise, pain screaming through every limb. Her clothes were torn, her skin marked with blood, but her eyes burned with fire. She looked around at the predators who had once circled her as prey and now bowed as subjects. She raised her head high, her voice raw but strong as she whispered, "I am no longer prey." The words carried through the clearing, and the beasts answered with another thunderous roar, a vow of loyalty written in sound. In the weeks that followed, Alara's life transformed. She no longer fought to survive each night. She lived among the predators as one of them. She learned their signals, their growls, the subtle ways they moved to hunt and to rule. They allowed her to share their kills, to rest beside their dens, to walk among their young without fear. The Deathworld itself seemed to shift around her. The smaller beasts avoided her scent. The forests grew quieter when she passed, as if the planet itself now recognized her authority. Yet her rule was not gentle. The Deathworld was merciless, and Alara had to prove herself again and again when rival packs came to challenge. She stood beside her predators and fought, using fire, traps, and her own cunning to bring down monsters that had terrorized the land for centuries. Every victory strengthened her bond with the predators. Every scar became a crown upon her body. She had risen not only as their queen, but as a symbol of human defiance carved into the heart of the galaxy's deadliest world. Far above, the alien council watched with growing dread. The probes they had left in orbit sent endless recordings of the girl who had tamed the untamable. Whispers spread through the empires. Stories of the human who commanded the apex predators of the Deathworld. Civilizations that had once mocked humanity now trembled at the thought. If one girl could bend the Deathworld to her will, what could an army of humans do if unleashed? The council tried to silence the tales, but it was too late. The legend of the Deathworlder Queen had already begun to spread like wildfire through the stars. Alara herself did not know of these whispers. Her world was still the soil, the storms, the endless roar of beasts that tested her daily, but she felt it in her heart, that her journey was no longer just about her survival. It was about all of humanity. She had shown the galaxy something no alien council wanted to believe, that humans were not weak, not fragile, not prey. They were creatures of fire, of spirit, of defiance, and when cast into the darkest of worlds, they did not break, they rose, one night. As she stood upon a cliff overlooking the burning forests below, the leader of the predators stood beside her, its massive form silent, its eyes glowing like twin suns. It lowered its head once again, and Alara reached out. Her hand resting on its scarred hide in that moment, she knew she had become more than a survivor, more than a queen. She had become a bridge between humanity and the wild fury of the galaxy itself. Her name would be carried not just in whispers but in roars that shook empires. The Deathworld had tried to kill her, had tried to break her, had tried to turn her into nothing but bones for its soil. Instead, it had forged her. It had burned away her weakness, carved her into strength, and crowned her with respect. Alara stood tall upon that cliff, her hair whipping in the storm, her eyes unyielding. She was the human queen of beasts, and her story was only beginning.